If you have about $2,000 to spend and you want to buy an automatic chronograph watch, there actually aren't that many options to choose from. You have a couple of options from the Swatch Group, more specifically from Hamilton and Tissot. You could also go with something like Young Hands, Max Bale, and maybe a few more options from some micro brands, but that's pretty much it. You can count all the options on the fingers of both of your hands. Now, if you want an automatic chronograph with more than 100 meters of water resistance, well, then you have even less options. Yama watches saw an opportunity to introduce an affordable, quote-unquote affordable, $2,000 is still a lot of money, but it's sort of average for an automatic chronograph watch. So Yama decided to introduce this diver style chronograph watch in this price category, and in today's video we will review one. I'm going to point out all the positives and all the negatives as I find them, and at the end of the video hopefully help you decide whether this watch is right for you if you're in the market for an automatic chronograph. Now let's begin, as always, by talking about the dimensions of the watch. 40 millimeters diameter, it's about 48 millimeters from one lug to another. It has a lug opening of 20 millimeters and it's about 15 millimeters thick. The case and the bracelet are both made out of stainless steel. It has a sapphire crystal with AR coating, 100 meters of water resistance. It's powered by the ETA Valjoux 7750 automatic chronograph movement, and it costs $1,950 US. The stainless steel case is executed in all high polished finish. There are some alternating finishes between brushing and polishing on the bracelet. The execution is okay. It's not the best that I've seen in this price point, but it's also not the worst. It's just average. The case design consists of three separate parts. So you have a case back, you have the main body of the watch, and then you have the bezel. The case back is screwed down and it features this nice engraving of Yama logo. I quite like this touch. The main body of the watch curves down a little to hide the thickness of the watch and also to hug the wrist for better comfort. You have pump style pushers for engagement and the reset of chronograph. One is at the 2 o'clock position, the other one is at the 4 o'clock position, and at the 3 o'clock position we see a screw down crown with Yama logo. This crown is housed within crown guards for a little bit more shock protection for the crown and the movement. Moving on to the bezel, it has a coin edge style bezel, so it's easy to grip. Even if you have wet hands, you can still easily turn this bezel, and it's a bi-directional 120 click bezel. As you can see on the black version, we see a 12-hour bezel, sort of this GMT style, if you will. And on the blue version, we see a reversed diver bezel. So instead of counting down, it's counting up. The bezel action on both watches is very satisfying. It's exactly the same and it's very easy to turn. I quite like this bezel action. I think they nailed it. In terms of the bezel insert, we see a ceramic and loomed bezel insert. I like both color variations. I prefer the blue overall, but the black one also looks really good. Now let's talk about this crystal. It sits over the bezel. It's sort of domed and boxed. And my favorite part about this crystal are the distortion angles that you get. If you catch this watch at the right angle, you can get some really cool, unique perspectives on this dial. There is a difference between a good quality crystal and a bad quality crystal. Happy to say this one here is one of the good ones. Both the blue and the black dials are executed with a slight gloss. They're not overly glossy, but they're also not matte. They're kind of in between, but I would call them on the glossier side. The layout between the two watches are exactly the same, except for a few cosmetic differences. We see printed loomed indexes. We also see a day-date complication at the 3 o'clock position. One interesting thing is that the day wheel is actually in French, which is kind of unique. I think you can get it in English, but I would go for the French one because it's a French company, a French watch, so why not go for days of the week in French? There's minimal writing on this dial. We have automatic written just under the day-date complication. I wish they didn't write that automatic, and there is a Yama logo closer to the 6 o'clock position subdial. Now, speaking of the subdials, the biggest differences between the two watches are actually in the subdial's design. As you can see, the subdial at the 9 o'clock position and the subdial for the 6 o'clock position are slightly different, but everything else in terms of functionality is exactly the same between the two watches. Out of the two, my preference is for the blue one. As I said earlier, I think it's just a little bit more versatile because in the darker lighting conditions, it almost looks black, but in the sunny lighting conditions, it looks blue, so you sort of get the best of both worlds. versus the black one just always looks dark no matter what, light or darker conditions. The indexes, the set of hands, and the bezel are loomed. Here's a loom shot for your reference. As you can see, the loom is not that bright. I think this watch could have used a few more layers on the bezel and on the indexes especially. One of the most important things about a chronograph is the chronograph engagement. Happy to say this one here is very good. There are very few things as satisfying on a watch as engaging that chronograph movement. This one here is powered by the Valjoux 7750, which is a very popular movement. It has 25 joules, beats at 28,800 vibrations per hour, and has a power reserve of about 48 hours. This is the movement that you will find pretty much in all automatic chronograph watches in this price category. Maybe not this exact movement, but a variation of this movement. So it's reliable, it's accurate, nothing really surprising here, and the engagement of the chronograph is very firm, clicky, just the way it should be. In terms of fit on the wrist, actually, this surprised me a little bit because I thought that this will be a very bulky and a big watch. And don't get me wrong, it is on the bigger side. If you have a smaller wrist or if you prefer smaller watches, this one will probably not appeal to you as much. However, if you have a larger wrist and you prefer larger watches, I think this one will be just fine. It hides its thickness pretty well, I'd say. Even though it's about 15 millimeters thick, it still can slide under the cuff of your jacket. No problem. I wore both watches interchangeably for about a week and I found them to be fairly comfortable. I don't really have any complaints in terms of the comfort on the wrist. However, where most of my complaints lie with this watch are in the bracelet. First of all, let's talk about the finish. As I mentioned earlier, it has an alternating polished and brushed finishes. And that would be fine if the first link, the link that goes into the bracelet, was executed in high polish to match the finish on the watch, but it's not. It's done in brushing, so you have this weird transition between a high polish on the case and then a brushing on the first link, just sort of done backwards, and then the middle links are done in high polish. Reverse that. Do the H links in high polish to match the finish on the case, and then do the center links in a brushed or satin finish, and that way it will look much better. Finish aside, another couple of negatives that I have. First of all, push pins for resizing, which is sort of surprising to see in the watch in this price categories. I know a few other companies do it, but it's a little disappointing. If you're spending about $2,000 on a watch, you are expecting screw operated pins for resizing. And the last complaint that I have, it's not really a big complaint, but it's about this clasp. It's just not very exciting. We've seen a clasp like this in watches for $200–300, so in a watch for around $2,000, I personally was hoping for something a little bit more. Don't get me wrong, the clasp works exactly as it should. It's a scissor clasp with 4 micro adjustments. It is secure, it works as intended. It's just not very exciting. I was hoping for something a little bit extra for the money that you pay. Overall, I think it's a pretty good watch. It's made for a very specific buyer, someone who has about $2,000 to spend on an automatic chronograph watch and who wants something with higher water resistance. If you are this type of buyer and if you have a larger wrist, I don't think you'll be disappointed. If you're okay with all the negatives that I pointed out, I think you'll quite enjoy this timepiece. Well, those were my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Also, give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we'll see you next time.